Welcome everyone to my discussion board. As we continue to talk about risk management this week, I'm going to touch specifically on the planning, monitoring, and controlling of risk. So I came across a picture that I thought was pretty appropriate, especially for what we're studying this week. And it just reads, life is more risk management rather than exclusion of risk. And I thought that was pretty appropriate because the more that I learn about risk management, I realized that, if you have proper risk management, you're really able to manage the risks that may happen within projects or may come up a part of a project. So really quickly wanted to just kind of do a quick review of some of the key definitions that we've had this week. One is just risk itself. Risk is the possibility of loss or injury, right? It involves uncertainty that if an event does happen, the results will lead to a positive or a negative effect. And then risk management, just as a reminder, risk management is the act or the process of dealing with risk, right? Risk management involves the planning for, the identifying, analyzing, responding to, monitoring, and controlling of risk itself. When we talk about risk response, we really have to start with the planning of risk response, right? So what is that? So it involves the planning and the execution with the objective of reducing risk to an acceptable level and exploiting potential opportunities. It includes using specific methods to help deal with known risk or risk opportunities, which include identifying who's going to be responsible for dealing with the risk or risk opportunity, outlining what resources will be needed and used to deal with the risk or risk opportunity. It also involves choosing the most appropriate response options to the risk. Planning for risk response is determining the specific approach to resolving a risk and risk opportunities. It often is done for those risk and risk opportunities that carry a medium to high risk level. The selected risk response option, if you take that and you couple that with other specific implementation approaches, a part of a project, then you start developing what's called a risk response strategy. And when documented, all of that put together into its own document is then called a risk response plan. Once you've actually determined the right approach, right, you've actually selected a risk response option. So if you take that risk response option and you couple that with a specific implementation approach, a part of the project, then you start developing what's known as a risk response strategy. When you document all of that information together, the strategy, its approaches, then you start to put together a risk response plan as well. And all of these things are key when we're talking about planning our risk response to various risk and risk opportunities, a part of projects. So what are some of the risk response options for risk and risk opportunities? You'll have responses such as an avoidance type of response. You'll also have mitigation. And when we talk about control, we're talking really about mitigation. How do we mitigate the risk through a lot of the monitoring? And that's the control that we have. Then we also have a response of transfer, right? Where we reduce the probability or impact of transferring ownership, right? We have exploiting, and exploiting is actually an opportunity, right? And that's taking advantage of the various opportunities that may exist within the project or some pricing that may come up as well. We have sharing. Sharing is also an opportunity. And that's being able to share some of the project load with other parties to help increase the higher impact of positive opportunities that may arise. We also have enhance, and enhance is another opportunity, which really involves increasing the probability of the impact of the opportunity. And then last but not least, we have acceptance, and acceptance can be a risk and an opportunity. And so it's unique and kind of stands there by its own because it can cover both. As we look a little bit deeper and come out of the planning stage or even part of the planning stage, we start talking about, the monitoring and controlling of risk, right? Ensuring that we have proper KPIs and metrics in place for us to be able to really monitor risk and be proactive about risk, right? We don't want risk to be, or the monitoring and the controlling of risk to be a tool that we use to solve a problem, right? We really want monitoring and controlling to involve tracking and evaluating of risk response, looking to understand the effectiveness of our risk response actions. We want it to be about seeking to establish metrics that can be used to monitor risk and risk opportunities. Our monitoring and controlling of risk need to provide a basis for developing additional risk response strategies or updating existing risk response strategies and reanalyzing known risk, right? And so constantly monitoring and controlling, mitigating. Remember, controlling, when we talk about controlling, we're talking about mitigating risk within our projects. And again, as I mentioned earlier, we want this to be, or we do not want this to be a tool that's used to solve problems. We want our monitoring and controlling to lead us to have more proactive actions in how we deal with risk and risk opportunities. Monitoring control also involves establishing the cost of risk, understanding the statistical information being returned from the monitoring data, and then being able to take all of that and provide, indicators that will show where the project remains currently within a risk or for risk. And a lot of times those controls specifically involve techniques such as looking at earned value or listing the earned value of the project, so that you're looking at the costs and the scheduled data to determine the project's risk response actions, and see whether or not those risk response actions are actually achieving the forecasted goals, right? You also want to ensure that you're looking at program matrix, and those are the measurements to determine the effectiveness of the development of the processes against their defined objectives. Next, you want to just look at the schedule performance monitoring and using the project schedule to determine whether or not the project is going to actually finish on time. And then last but not least, you want to look at the technical performance measurements. And this is a product design assessment, which looks at the estimates through engineering analysis and testing to evaluate the value of the technical performance parameters within the project and the risk response actions that are taken to some of those technical items that are involved in the project. So that's all that I have on risk response, the planning of risk response, monitoring and controlling risk. So thank you for your time and listening. I do have 2 discussion questions I would like for you guys to answer. So I'll leave these here for you to read and look forward to your responses. Thank you.